A look at the future of oil prices today as the International Energy Agency releases its World Energy Outlook. Richard Mallinson joins me. He is an analyst with Energy Aspects. And Richard, we should tackle prices first. We, of course, have seen very low oil prices for some time. What did we learn about where prices are going in this report?
Well, this is the long-term forecasting arm of the IEA, and their outlook in their kind of central projection scenario is that we're only going to see oil prices gradually recover. It's going to take the rest of this decade to get up to about $80 a barrel, which is still going to be below the plus of $100 that we saw in the last few years. And then they're going to continue rising through the next couple of decades because oil demand is still growing. But they see that being a long and slow rebalancing process.
What about supply? I know the IEA said non-OPEC supply will start declining in about 5 years, but your view is quite different. Tell us about that.
Yes, so I mean, where we agree with the IEA is that we've seen huge reductions in investment across non-OPEC supply. So the oil majors, the smaller oil companies, they've all been cutting spending because of this lower price environment. There's no doubt about that. But I think where we differ in our view is how long that takes to show up in terms of the actual supply numbers that we see. Certainly this year, supply from countries like Brazil, Russia, it's still been growing because of the investments made over the last few years. But if you look at the IEA report, they're saying it will still continue growing, maybe just slowing gradually for 3 or 4 more years before eventually declining. We think that that decline comes much quicker because not only are future projects being cancelled, we're also seeing reductions in spending on infill drilling, on maintenance for existing project. So we're going to start seeing the effects of that, I think, showing up from the second half of next year in terms of declines in overall non-OPEC supply. There'll be a few countries still managing to grow, but the weight of the countries that are declining, the mature basins like the North Sea and places like Mexico, I think is going to tip the balance much sooner than the IEA predicts.
So in terms of what's happening with prices and this very slow, gradual recovery, is that a story about too much supply in the market, or is it about a lack of demand?
Well, again, looking at what the IEA says, they acknowledge that demand has picked up very strongly because of the low price environment this year, but they think that it will return to a much slower trend. They see in the backdrop a big move to less energy intensive economic growth around the world, places like China and the emerging economies being less reliant on not only oil but coal and gas to deliver their future economic growth. And I think that is true as a long-term trend, but demand, we agree with the IEA that demand growth is still there. It probably does settle back to around 1 million barrels a day. The real debate and the real discussion going on across the oil market at the moment is how quickly do you see supply respond to lower prices? In the US, we're already seeing tight oil production falling, and it's beginning to fall quite rapidly. But outside of the US, the rest of non-OPEC, that's where the IEA is taking one view, which is it takes a long time for the slowdown to show up. We think the slowdown will come sooner because of the depth of the investment cuts.
And finally, Richard, we are seeing from the IEA a future look into investments, and renewables look like they will be an increasing part of the energy mix. What's your view on that?
There's definitely much more of a role for renewables in this year's World Energy Outlook as we get into the second half of next decade and into the 2030s. And I think that timescale is accurate. It's going to take some time. We still need the price of the main renewable sources to come down to really compete against coal, even against natural gas. And we also need to see things like battery technology move on to a level where it can support and make up for the fact that the sun doesn't shine at night, that wind doesn't blow consistently. But given the policy pressure that I think is building and gaining momentum, and given the technological advances that are likely to come, but the timescales are difficult to predict, I think we will see a big emerging role for renewables, but it's going to be very varied, and this is something the IEA highlights.
Richard Mallinson with Energy Aspects, thanks so much for your time. I'm Rhonda Schaffler for The Street.